Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this evening with my colleagues to have a discussion about the nation's #1 anti-poverty program for the elderly and the nation's #1 anti-poverty program for children. More veterans rely on Social Security disability than they do on the VA. And, Mr. Speaker, we want to make sure that we're addressing this to our colleagues. And since you are in the chair from Minnesota, Mr. Speaker, I want you to know that you have more than 189,000 Social Security recipients in your district, more than 147,000 retirees, more than 20,000 disabled, 8,000 widows, 9,000 children. And here's the key, Mr. Speaker, $335 million a month comes into your district for those Social Security recipients. And where do they spend it? Right back in their district. And yet it's been more than 53 years since Congress has enhanced Social Security. Richard Nixon was President of the United States the last time Social Security was enhanced. Democrats are bound and determined to make sure that we get something simple like a vote here in Congress to help out all of those people in your district, Mr. Speaker, as well as highlight why this is so important. 70 million Americans rely on Social Security. 10,000 baby boomers a day become eligible for Social Security. 40,000 Americans rely on Social Security in and of itself as their primary tenet for retirement. It is the nation's #1 anti-poverty program for the elderly and for children. And that's why our colleagues have taken to the floor today so that the American people understand that what's between them and enhancement to this program is a vote on Social Security 2100 that will extend the solvency of Social Security, but as importantly, expand benefits, including making sure that the more than 23 million people that pay taxes on Social Security no longer have to do that. What could be a better bipartisan plan than helping out every single individual in everyone's district and also providing 23 million, not the wealthiest Americans, but the everyday citizens who work week long to provide for their families and pay into a system and haven't received an enhancement in 53 years. That's why Joe Neguse is here as part of leadership that has strongly endorsed this, and that's why I yield time to him to speak.
Well, first and foremost, let me thank the distinguished gentleman from Connecticut, our former caucus chair, for his clarion call that he has issued year after year, month after month, day after day to protect, to strengthen Social Security. Couldn't be more important, and we couldn't be more grateful for his leadership and the leadership of so many of my colleagues who have joined us tonight on the House floor to talk to the American people about the ways in which House Democrats are protecting critical programs like Social Security and Medicare, and the myriad ways in which, unfortunately, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are doing the exact opposite. I will give you but one example, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the latter. I know you are familiar, don't know if the American people are familiar, with the Republican Study Committee, the largest caucus within the Republican conference. 80% of the Republican conference consider themselves members of this committee. 100% of House Republican leadership count themselves among the members of this committee. The former chairman of the Republican Study Committee is now the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. Why do I bring up the Republican Study Committee? Well, it might interest you to know, Mr. Speaker, that just 2 months ago, the Republican Study Committee issued a budget for 2025. Again, this is a committee that has 80% of the Republican conference in its membership. This backwards budget plan is incredibly revealing. What does it do? It upends critical programs that American families depend on, makes draconian cuts to Medicare and Social Security, a plan that increases the retirement age to 69, forcing Americans to work longer for less, a plan that cuts disability benefits, erodes care for children, making it more expensive to care for our families. Their plan raises Medicare costs for seniors, takes away the program's ability to negotiate prescription drug costs, repeals the $35 insulin and the $2,000 out-of-pocket caps that House Democrats, the members gathered here on the floor this evening, fought so vigorously to enact in the 117th Congress. And just to be clear, Mr. Speaker, although we're here tonight to talk about Social Security and Medicare, our efforts to protect and strengthen and expand both of those programs and Republican efforts to dismantle them, it is worth noting that this is Police Week. And notwithstanding the many statements made by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle concerning their purported support for law enforcement, their budget tells a very different story. Why? How? Well, I encourage every American, go to page 148 of the Republican Study Committee's budget, and what you will find is clear, unambiguous, plain language that states that they would like to reduce funding for community-oriented policing services, the COPS program, a program that the distinguished gentleman from Pennsylvania has fought to expand for years, a program that is funding the hiring of law enforcement officers in my district in Colorado and countless other jurisdictions across our great country, a program that is critical to law enforcement's abilities to provide for public safety in our country, and a program that they intend to cut. So make no mistake, Mr. Speaker. Insofar as one were to glean a central observation from a review, a cursory review of their budget, it is simple. House Republicans are uninterested in tackling issues that matter to the American people. We will not let them cut Social Security. We won't let them cut Medicare. We won't let them cut law enforcement funding. That much is clear. With that, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Chairman, I yield back to the gentleman from Connecticut.
I thank the gentleman from Colorado and our esteemed leader for his contribution, and would point out as well that the repeal of WEP and GPO, which directly impacts police officers and firefighters, is contained within our proposal. It needs a vote. Social Security has no impact on the debt or deficit, and as President Biden has proposed, is fully paid for by, and most Americans don't even realize this, by lifting the cap on people making over $400,000. And in doing so, allows us to enhance the program for the first time in 20 plus years, and also make sure that we extend the solvency of the program. Someone who knows that extraordinarily well is the gentleman from New Jersey who also serves on the Social Security Subcommittee. I recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Pasquarello.
Thank you, John. I want to thank Mr. Larson for putting his work and soul on the line for the last several years. Mr. Speaker, I rise today on behalf of the more than 124,000 constituents in the 9th District of North Jersey who rely on Social Security each and every month. Social Security is one of America's greatest success stories. After nearly 90 years, it still stands as a monument to decency, dignity, and the birthright of hardworking Americans. Yet, throughout its storied history, has been under attack. Going back to 1935, it has been the subject of attacks and lies from day one. The study committee just referred to, which represents 3/4 of the House Republicans, proposed slashing Social Security benefits by $718 billion. If I was sitting home right now, I'd be saying, well, does that mean me? Does that mean my benefits that I've paid into? They're going to vote now and take it away? It's the only thing I live on. Republican leadership wants to create a so-called fiscal commission in our government funding bill. That is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Without aggressive action, Social Security lurches toward insolvency. Congress has a sacred responsibility to fight for its future. That is why I'm standing with Representative Larson on a Social Security 2100 Act to assure the long-term strength and the solvency of Social Security, and I will keep standing as long as we have to fight. We're not going home. The Social Security 2100 Act provides paid-for benefit enhancements while not raising taxes on middle-class families. It's a no-brainer. Our bill ends the painful 5-month disability waiting period. Imagine that. It would ensure Americans suffering with permanent disorders like Huntington's disease get the help they need without red tape or delay. The bill eliminates the windfall elimination provision so that firefighters and police and teachers and others get the full benefits that they have earned. With the Social Security 2100 Act, we are fighting for our seniors who have worked their entire lives and rely on Social Security to make ends meet. And I remember the first election, congressional election I ran in, Mr. Speaker, in the year 1996, which wasn't yesterday. I remember I walked into the Hall of Seniors in the spring of that year, before the election actually was on. And I knew everything about, I thought, Social Security, but I never expected to get the first question about Social Security. And I was asked, what are you going to do about Social Security? And one of our seniors asked that question in 1996. And here we are, 28 years later. What do you know? I will not vote for a convenient increase in the age requirement. They want you to work and drop dead so that you collect under the ground, I guess. You won't be above ground. I will not vote for cuts of Social Security in order to pay for it. And we are fighting for working families. We must get this done for the American people. There's no excuses. If you're watching, call in. Let us know what you think. This is your money, our money. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank the gentleman from New Jersey, and wanted to point out to Speaker Johnson that he has 158,000 Social Security recipients in his district. And in Louisiana, they receive $233 million in monthly benefits. Think about that. What that does for economic development for those people. Where do they spend that money? Linda Sanchez knows this. Linda Sanchez, who also serves on the Ways and Means Committee and on the subcommittee, understands how vitally important this is, and also that for more than 5 million of our Americans, they receive below poverty level checks from Social Security, having paid in to the system all their lives. And the majority of them happen to be women, and the majority of them women of color. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
I want to thank my good friend and colleague, John Larson, who has been at the forefront of advocating for changes to the Social Security system that will ensure its longevity for the next generation and generations to come, and that will increase the benefits for those that currently receive Social Security. In contrast, the Republicans are proposing cuts to Social Security, and those cuts will harm millions of Americans. But make no mistake, cutting Social Security is a direct attack on the Latino population in this country. Social Security benefits are a significant portion of retirement income for Latinos. 42% of married Latino couples and 59% of unmarried Latino individuals rely on Social Security for 90% or more of their retirement income. Yet my Republican colleagues are hell-bent on cutting those Social Security benefits. Their proposed budget would cut Social Security benefits for 253 million people, and Latino communities, sadly, will pay the price. Without Social Security, 47% of Latino retirees would be living in poverty. And Mr. Larson frequently says, Social Security is the most successful anti-poverty program that this country has ever created. Democrats, in contrast to my Republicans, who want to cut Social Security or increase the age at which you can begin to draw on it, they're committed to protecting people, all people, from living in poverty. Democrats want to invest in programs like Social Security so that more Americans, including Latinos, can afford to retire. And one of the ingenious parts of Social Security 2100 will increase the cap for those who pay into the Social Security system. And I frequently give this example. I think it's important. Many Americans don't know that once you earn above a certain income, you stop paying into the Social Security system. So that means that a professional athlete, like, say, a professional baseball player who makes millions of dollars a year in income, in their first at-bat of the season, they hit that cap and they pay no more money into Social Security the rest of the year. I think that we can fix Social Security, increase its longevity, protect communities like the Latino communities and the women who depend predominantly on Social Security for their retirement income. And all we're asking for is a vote on this legislation. I have no doubt that if we put that bill on the floor, it would pass by a large margin. Give us a vote. I yield back.
I want to thank the gentlelady from California and again highlight what we're asking for. A vote. Imagine the United States Congress actually voting. Now, here's the deal. If you got a better idea, please bring it to the floor. Let's vote on it. But don't we all agree that this is something that all Americans need? Republicans in their heart, and I know Representative Jody Arrington understands this, on their budget committee, know that the American people desperately need this. More than 50 years since we have enhanced a program for the people of this country. It's outrageous. You can embrace tax cuts for billionaires as though they needed them. And yet a tax cut for a person working who still finds themselves working after they retired is double taxed on their Social Security. There should be outrage on this floor and demanding a vote. And God only knows that if you've got a better idea or a better program, please put it forward. Let's do the democratic thing and vote on it. The gentleman from Rhode Island campaigned on this throughout his effort to be successfully elected to the United States Congress. And I recognize the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Amo.
I thank my colleague, the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Larson, for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to address an issue that is deeply personal to me and many Americans, the sacred trusts of Medicare and Social Security. Mr. Speaker, I was raised by a mom who worked double shifts as a nurse in Rhode Island in nursing homes. I grew up understanding how critical Medicare and Social Security are for seniors in the Ocean State. Now, as the congressman for Rhode Island's 1st Congressional District, I am committed to expanding the promise of these critical programs. Democrats know how to get this done. Through the landmark Inflation Reduction Act, Congress authorized Medicare to negotiate the price of prescription drugs, capping the cost of insulin for seniors at just $35 a month and limiting out-of-pocket expenses to $2,000 a year. And this Congress, we've committed to Congressman Larson's Social Security 2100 Act, a bill that would shore up benefits by ensuring the wealthiest Americans play by the same rules as everyone else. And yet, as I stand here today, I can't help but contrast these essential measures with the callous budget proposal on the other side of the aisle. Make no mistake, the Republican Study Committee's proposal is a backward budget. If enacted, it would cut Social Security benefits for more than 250 million Americans nationwide. In my home state of Rhode Island, the Republican budget slashes benefits for 74% of the population, forcing 3 out of every 4 residents to work longer for less. In a similar way, Republicans propose undoing the Inflation Reduction Act, jacking up the price of prescription drugs that seniors rely on. No one, and I mean no one, should ever have to doubt if Social Security and Medicare will be there for them in their retirement. That's why I urge my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to come together. Let's save Social Security together by passing Congressman Larson's bill. Let's expand, not repeal, the health care savings that Medicare seniors have seen under the Inflation Reduction Act. And most importantly, let's abandon this misguided idea that punishing seniors, pushing austerity cuts, and raising costs is somehow the solution to the problems we face. Mr. Speaker, we don't have to choose between ensuring solvency and safeguarding the benefits of millions of Americans. We can and we should do both. And by having a vote on the Social Security 2100 Act, we will. Thank you, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman from Rhode Island and wanted to say this as well, that this is a bill that was constructed by more than 350 different groups across this great country and by members of this body who put together their ideas. The Ways and Means Committee merely took the great ideas of our colleagues and put them together. ideas that have been endorsed by the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, Social Security Works, the Alliance of Retired Americans, the California Alliance for Retired American Paralyzed Veterans of America, Strengthened Social Security Coalition, the NAACP, and the list goes on. The gentlelady from Florida understands this, and Florida probably leads the country in terms of the number of seniors that it has in their district. And as we pointed out before to the speaker, Madam Frankel, that every district receives money, $364 million a month. But it's been that way for more than 50 plus years. These programs need to be enhanced and extended, not cut. The provision by the Republican Study Committee, if there's nothing done by 2034, Social Security is cut by 20%. And so instead, they're calling to raise the age now and cut Social Security by 21% today. How does that possibly make any sense? The lady from Florida understands this, and I yield the floor to her.
Thank you. Mr. Larson, thank you so much for your leadership on this issue. To Mr. Neguse for getting us here, and to my colleagues. I think, Mr. Larson, I've joined you on this discussion for about 10 years or more now. I want to tell you about one of my constituents. Her name is Janet Swayback. She's in her 80s. She lives in Delray Beach, Florida, retired. When she was a very young girl, she lost her dad at a very early age, and so she watched her mom struggle with their own family bills. And so Janet, to help the family, began working at the age of 17. And so now I got to get my math right. She's been working 50 years, so I guess that makes her, I don't know. Someone add that up for me. But here's the point. Let me tell you some of the things that she's done over these years. She was a nurse working in a hospital, working countless hours taking care of patients. She moved to Florida, and she became a director of a skilled nursing facility. And then she worked at Alzheimer's patients at the Alzheimer's Community Care, probably one of the most difficult assignments a healthcare provider could have. And she managed one of our crisis center hotlines. She retired about 8 years ago, and now is one of almost 200,000 seniors in my district, or I like to say seasoned adults. We're seasoned adults in my home district of Palm Beach County, and like the 66 million other Americans rely on Social Security to meet their needs. And Mr. Larson, I like the point you made that not only does Social Security meet the needs of so many of these seniors, but our seniors are great economic generators. I know where I live, if not for the seniors' economic activity, we'd be in pretty bad shape. Janet told me that she fears that without Social Security, she would have to turn to her children somewhat like her mother turned to her when she was young. So here it is. She's worked her whole life paying in Social Security to get benefits. She and millions of other Americans, nurses, school teachers, janitors, construction workers, they worked under the sacred promise that when they turned 65, they would be able to retire with comfort and dignity. And now, House Republicans want to break that promise. Their recently proposed budget slashes Social Security benefits, raises the retirement age, raises Medicare costs, all while promising another giant tax break for their wealthy friends and large corporations. And I know, and I'll say this, and I hope we all agree, that no one who works their entire life should retire into poverty. Social Security is an earned benefit that Americans have already paid for with each and every of their paycheck. And President Biden and House Democrats and senators are committed to defending it from Republican cuts and securing it with meaningful legislation that requires our wealthiest citizens to pay their fair share. So I am proud to stand here with my colleagues, standing up for Social Security, keeping it secure, and honoring our most seasoned citizens. And with that, I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady from Florida again and reiterate that all we're asking for is a vote. So for those citizens tuned into C-SPAN and listening tonight, if you're saying, well, what do you mean? Why is it that you can't get a vote on this in the United States Congress? Good question. Call your representative and ask them, why aren't they voting to improve a program that hasn't been enhanced in more than 50 years? We hear from the other side all the time about what we need to do in terms of cuts. Imagine this is what they'd like to cut. If they've got a better idea, they should bring it to the floor. The way a democracy works is it's a debate about ideas, and then there's actually a vote that's cast. The gentlelady from New Mexico understands this and understands how important the money coming into her district is monthly as well. It understands how vitally important Social Security is to our economy, and not just to our retirees, but to our disabled and to their spouses and to children. The genius of Franklin Delano Roosevelt is what keeps entrepreneurialism and capitalism alive and allows people to take risk because they know that there's a safety net there for its people. The gentlelady understands this, and I yield the floor to the gentlelady from New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In New Mexico, we care for our elders. It is a part of our culture. It is a part of who we are, because our elders are the people who birthed us, who raised us, who cared for us. They are our grandparents and our parents, our aunties and our uncles, our veterans, the people who carry our histories, our cultures, our languages, and our traditions. And that is why it is so outrageous to me, as a New Mexican, that the House GOP would even consider, more or less propose, to gut the critical programs that support our elders. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. In New Mexico, thousands of New Mexicans depend on Social Security. Our seniors, our elders, people living with disabilities. Over 450,000 New Mexicans depend on Medicare. That is over 20% of our state's population. New Mexicans depend on these programs to access life-saving health care, to provide for their families, to put a roof over their head, to put food on the table. Before Social Security, our elders were left with nothing. Before Medicaid and Medicare, our seniors and our low-income families could not access life-saving health care. In New Mexico, over 12% of our seniors are considered low income and living below the poverty line. Thousands struggling to maintain housing, to have basic services, to have a roof over their head, to put food on their table. So let me be clear. These programs save lives, and they have secured our elders for generations. And New Mexicans and all Americans should be able to live without fear that politicians here in Washington are going to use their lives for political gain. But here we are on the House floor, and the GOP is playing politics with the lives of our seniors, proposing to gut the fundamental programs that have supported them for generations. And we already know what happens when federal programs are cut. Hospitals close, food insecurity rises, critical programs disappear. And that is why we are fighting as House Democrats and the Biden administration to protect our seniors, to protect these programs, to ensure that they are there for generations to come. That is why we are fighting to protect Social Security and our health care services. It's why we took on Big Pharma 2 years ago and won. It's why we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which has the largest single expansion of Medicaid since the passage of the Affordable Care Act. It's why we fought to lower prescription drug costs. It's why we capped insulin prices for every American. And it's why I fought in the state legislature to end state taxes on Social Security benefits in New Mexico. So I ask my colleagues, is this how you care for your elders? Is this how they taught you and raised you? Are these the values that you were raised with? Well, I can tell you, that is not how we treat our elders in New Mexico, because we know they depend on these programs, because we know the life-saving care and support that are necessary, and we know that we cannot break the promises to those who cared for us and raised us. And Democrats understand, just like New Mexicans, that we must care for our seniors. And that is why we are fighting back and working every day to make sure that we secure their well-being. I yield back.
I thank the gentlelady from New Mexico for her eloquence. There's no one more eloquent or well-versed on this subject than the Deaness of the House of Representatives, someone who has lived and breathed this issue, has stood up when the other side has referred to Social Security as an entitlement. It is not an entitlement. It's an earned benefit that people have paid for. And you know, Mr. Speaker, the only thing they have to do is look at their pay stub, because on it, it says FICA. That stands for Federal Insurance, not an entitlement. Federal Insurance Contribution. Whose? The people of the United States of America who have paid into this program, and that Congress has not enhanced. This debate is not only about protecting Social Security, it's about expanding benefits that haven't been expanded in more than 50 years. I commend President Biden for having the courage and the temerity on this floor in the State of the Union message to speak directly to the American people, and even those colleagues on the other side who try to decry the efforts of Social Security and the president's plan to make sure that it's solvent by lifting the cap. Imagine that, on people making over $400,000. Marcy Kaptur understands this thoroughly when she talks to people in Ohio that are infuriated, who say, well, wait a minute, you're telling me that a person making $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 pays throughout the year, but somebody making over $400,000 is done paying in January? Or as Ms. Sanchez said, a baseball player after their first at bat? Nobody has fought harder for working people than the gentle lady from Ohio. I yield to her.
I thank the ranking member, Mr. Larson, for his persevering leadership on this critical issue to millions and millions and millions of Americans, and Assistant Leader Neguse for your leadership. Thank you for being here this evening, and I appreciate your yielding me time to highlight the importance of Social Security, but also your tireless work to safeguard and assure coverage in Social Security for all Americans who qualify for their earned benefits, which you have talked about this evening, every single member who got up here tonight. This is not a welfare program. This is an earned benefit. For nearly a century, America has made a sacred promise. Those who work hard throughout their lives will benefit from the fruits of their labor during their retirement. Social Security promises a safe and secure retirement for tens of millions of Americans during their golden years. But we're here tonight because without action by this House leading, that promise is at risk. Like my colleagues, I represent probably over 150,000 retirees, a majority women, in Northwest Ohio, who want to see responsible solutions to protect Social Security going forward. And for Ohio, that includes eliminating the windfall penalty. I agree with Congressman Larson. The billionaire class must join the vast majority of Americans in paying their fair share into this critical system. Yes, it's a retirement system, but it's also an insurance system. It's a disability system, and it's a survivorship system for children. By making this happen, the Social Security 2100 Act, championed by Congressman Larson, will increase benefits for current and new beneficiaries. It will protect retirees against inflation and repeal the windfall elimination provision once and for all. The Social Security 2100 Act is one of the most important bills before this Congress, and we must push the leadership for a vote on this House floor as soon as possible. It impacts 68 million beneficiaries. Already, there are 184 House co-sponsors of this bill, and Speaker Johnson could move this bill for the floor for a vote tomorrow. Additionally, the Social Security Fairness Act has 319 bipartisan co-sponsors, more than 2/3 of the chamber, and they can't get a vote. It's stopped up in the leadership. America made a promise to workers, and Democrats are committed to making good on that promise. I'm the granddaughter of immigrants who worked at the lowest wage and worst jobs. First fired, last hired. They simply could not have existed if it were not for Social Security in their retirement years. The same was true for our parents. You see, Social Security is not just a program. It is a trust, a sacred trust, and that trust is intergenerational. I may be the only member here this evening who was present in the 98th Congress in April of 1983 to vote for the refinancing of Social Security Title II for the next generation. Among the most critical votes I ever cast, and I remember it to this day, as we stood on this floor and we cheered. That vote was extremely important because it refinanced Social Security for the first time in a generation. It left some work undone, which we must repair, but it resulted from a brokered compromise between Republican President Ronald Reagan and House Speaker Tip O'Neill. They knew how to compromise. Now Congress must meet its responsibility to do the same for this generation and those that follow. I want to make sure that we place in the record information about that brokered compromise, and also reports from the U.S. News and World Report and other materials that attend to that extraordinary moment in history. Let's get the job done. we ask Speaker Johnson to bring up H.R. 2100 for a vote. And I want to thank Congressman Larson, Congressman Neguse, Congressman Cartwright, who are here this evening as part of this important messaging to the American people to say the time is now. Bring up H.R. 2100. Thank you for your extraordinary, persevering leadership.
Thank the
I yield
gentlelady
back.
from Ohio, and she mentioned Mr. Cartwright, who I think epitomizes the concern that exists in this body, in the Congress, for people who go back home every week and meet with their constituents. The constituents of Pennsylvania are fortunate that they have someone who understands their needs and understands the neglect that Congress has shown in not addressing the #1 anti-poverty program for elderly and for children in this country. As difficult as times are now, we need to make sure that minimally we have a vote. I do not understand the reluctance on the other side to bring forward legislation and actually vote on it. If you got a better idea, or even if you object to this plan, please tell us what it is that you object to. What it is about Social Security and making sure that nobody works all their lives and pays into a system and then retires into poverty. Matt Cartwright understands that. He understands his district in Pennsylvania and the importance of getting this legislation done. I yield the floor to him.
Ranking Member Larson, I thank you, and I wonder if you would submit yourself to a few questions. The first question I have is, and we heard it tonight, we heard it, the statement that the assertion that Social Security for generations has been the single most important income support program in America and has lifted millions upon millions of seniors out of poverty. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
Well, we've also heard talk about this Republican Study Committee, which is a group of 80% of the Republicans here in the United States House of Representatives, and it's a committee that came up with a proposal about Social Security to raise the retirement age and require seniors to continue working into their senior years. Is that true?
Not only is it true, but I think what the general public needs to understand, and as you point out, Mr. Cartwright, the saying goes like this: well, you know, people are living longer, so therefore, because they're living longer, what we ought to do is raise the age. What the study committee doesn't tell you is that for every year you raise the age, that's a 7% cut in benefits. Oh, so if you raise the age to 70, that's a 21% cut in your benefits going forward. How is it, from just mere logic, that if you're living longer, you need to live on 21% less? The American people understand this, and that's why they're so upset. But that's why, Mr. Cartwright, we need a vote.
Well, one final question for you, Ranking Member Larson. this idea of raising the retirement age, and as you've explained very well, which constitutes a cut in benefits for every year they raise it, economists have worked it out, how much that's going to cost out of the Social Security system. Their plan is to raise the retirement age and cut Social Security benefits by $1.5 trillion with a T. That's what happens when you raise the retirement age to 69 the way they want to do. Is that right?
That is correct. And I guess the sad thing is that this needs a vote. It needs a debate. Philosophically, if you believe, and God bless, some on the other side do, believe that this is some form of socialism and that everybody ought to be able to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and be able to make do for themselves. You don't need the government to do anything for you, even when you've paid in all your life to a program that has been the greatest American program to sustain our elderly and to sustain our children. If you disagree with that, that's terrific, but let's then take that to the American people. And where do you do that? On the floor of the House of Representatives, where you actually will debate the issue and put forward your proposals versus ours. Isn't that the way democracy is supposed to work, Mr. Cartwright?
You got that right, Ranking Member Larson, and thank you for answering my questions. Tonight, I'm here to speak on behalf of 191,000 people from northeastern Pennsylvania who depend on Social Security checks coming in to keep them alive. Probably over 40% of them look to those checks as the only visible means of support that they have. And now the Republican Study Committee's FY25 proposal comes along and talks about raising the retirement age to 69. You know, that's fine if like us, you fly a desk for a living. But if you do what so many Americans do, the people who paid in paycheck after paycheck after paycheck into this sacred promise, this insurance program, FICA, if you do what they do, they have to lift and climb and carry and dig. And these are the people doing manual labor, and they're expected to work well into their senior years, according to the Republican Study Committee. Folks, this is a breach of a promise. It is a betrayal of the Americans who paid into this system their entire work lives. It's unacceptable. And it's something that the Republicans have done year in and year out. Remember when in 2006 it was that they were proposing privatizing the entire Social Security system, saying, well, that will free people up to invest their money in the stock market. And then what happened to the stock market a couple of years later? It cratered. People would have lost their entire life savings, and there would have been no checks of any nature coming into their post office boxes. Folks, the answer is not cutting benefits. The answer is Social Security 2100, Mr. Larson's bill, something that I have proudly supported for over 10 years now. This bill would increase benefits by 2% of all Social Security beneficiaries for the first time in 52 years. It would eliminate the WEP, which hurts policemen, firemen, prison correctional officers, all sorts of public employees. Rather than cutting benefits, Representative Larson and the Democratic Party, have a plan to protect and enhance Social Security. It's a plan to put people over politics and make good on our promise to put American seniors first and pass Social Security 2100. Mr. Larson, I yield back to you.
And thank you, Mr. Cartwright, and my good friend Jody Arrington, and I sincerely mean that when I say that. A lot of times on this floor we say good friend, but I appreciate the effort that he puts into his work. And I bring these cards here this evening just to point out to our colleagues what it is actually. I don't think, and we've made one for every member of Congress, and this is just a direct plea. Understand what's going on in your district because of Social Security. And then also understand that, and citizens have every right to ask, so why hasn't Congress done anything to enhance this program, Democrats and Republicans, in more than 50 years? Especially when we know how vital this program is to our own system of capitalism and entrepreneurialism, and what it means to every single one of our communities. There is not a better economic development program that Texas will receive than the individuals in everyone's district receiving their Social Security check. They're not going out and buying stock options. They're buying groceries. They're going to the pharmacy. They're going to the dry cleaners. They're paying their rent and their mortgages. They're meeting the concerns in their community. And in doing so, those communities can thrive. It's long overdue. More than 50 years. All we're asking for is a vote. If you got a better idea, in a democracy, the way I was brought up, you put it out there. And then lo and behold, we actually have a vote that requires a debate and a discussion, and then Congress demonstrating what it believes in by actually casting a vote. I yield the final comment to our leader, Joe Neguse.
Well, I would just simply say one of the many privileges I have in serving as the Assistant Democratic Leader is having the opportunity to see firsthand the way in which my colleagues in the House Democratic Caucus are able to convert their passion and conviction on consequential public policy issues into action. And that is precisely what the gentleman from Connecticut has done for the better part of the last decade, from when he first introduced this legislation. I'm proud to support it. I'm proud to support his efforts to protect and enhance Social Security, and to do everything that we can to ensure that our colleagues' plans on the other side of the aisle to dismantle this program never see the light of day. And I yield back to my distinguished colleague and my friend from Connecticut.
I thank the gentleman and thank the Speaker.
Does the gentleman yield back?
Yes.
Thank you. Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair and not to a perceived viewing audience. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Roy, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Well, I thank the Speaker. I notice it must be campaign season.